If you don't get to a point where you have a clear path to 270 electoral votes, if you don't get into the debates, if it's not clear that you can win the election, what do you do with your substantial and passionate following? Clearly, you have a significant following. You can impact this race significantly if you don't win. What do you do with that? You could be the decider in this race.
Yeah, I've offered President Biden because so many people have said, oh, you're going to be a spoiler and you're going to get Donald Trump elected and that's going to be the end of the republic. And of course, people who support President Trump say the same thing about President Biden. But what the poll that Zogby did, which is the biggest poll taken, and that poll showed that President Biden cannot win the election. If I'm in, he loses. President Trump wins. If I'm out, he loses 2 more states. He loses Maine and Virginia. And so I said, but I can win. If he withdrew, then I could beat President Trump. And if Trump withdrew, which of course he's not going to, I will, landslide against President Biden. So I said to President Biden, I sent him a proposal. I said, let's do a spoiler agreement where we will co-fund a poll together, the 2 of us, and whoever in October and whoever is least likely to vote to beat Donald Trump will withdraw. So do I expect that he will take that deal? No. But, I'm not a spoiler. A spoiler is somebody who cannot win.
And stays in.
And they stay in and disrupt the expectations of somebody who can.
So you've made him that offer?
I've made him that offer, yeah.
Has he responded at all?
No.
Will he?
No. But I don't know where he's going to be at that point. I don't know. He seems, when you, every time I watch him, it's kind of heartbreaking. It's like watching your 5-year-old the first time they play on a jungle gym. You're like, is he going to be okay? And I don't know what the people around him are thinking of.
Is there any theory where you would run with him?
With President Biden?
Right.
No.
No way.
No. And
so if the polls are clear, does the Democratic Party make a deal with you? If he steps aside, if he comes up with some theory in the fall, made up or otherwise, and says, I'm going to have to step aside for health reasons or whatever, do they come to you? Do they look at the poll and come to you?
If they did, I would listen to that proposal. But I doubt if they would, because the people who will then make the decision are the superdelegates, and the superdelegates are people who work for or are the possessions of the big corporate lobbyists that fund the Democratic Party. So the lobbyists that fund the party, the big corporations like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, all the military contractors, the pharmaceutical companies, they control the superdelegates. And I think those people, they would rather see President Trump in office than see me in office.
Well, if Trump's side's not going to come to you, then have you built yourself in a box you can't get out of?
Well, I get a lot of Trump voters. So, I get 57% of the people who support me say that they would vote that if I leave the race, they'll vote for President Trump. And then I get a lot of people who were not going to vote at all, no matter what, except if you run. We're not going to choose between the lesser of 2 evils. But, right now I'm beating President Trump and President Biden in these key demographics. The one group that I don't do well with, which is my Achilles heel, my key group, is baby boomers. If you think about it, the baby boomers should like me because, they were here during the Kennedy era. They remember Camelot with nostalgia. And they loved me when I was only the environmental champion and before I, started working on public health. But what we found is that, I think the reason they don't like me is because they hear all of the sort of the defamations that you outlined at the beginning of this interview. He's anti-vax. He thinks chemicals cause you to be gay. all the ways that those things are treated, and the way that they're repeated and they're mischaracterized in the press. So they think I'm genuinely a lunatic, right?
Are you?
Am I a lunatic? No, I feel like, of course, if you ask a lunatic whether they're a lunatic, they're never going to know. So
are you a lunatic?
No, of course not. I've had a long career with so many milestones that would be pretty unattainable by somebody who is a lunatic. I've won hundreds of cases. I've written dozens of best-selling books on different issues, and I have good relationships. All these, so I feel like I'm defending myself and proving that I'm not a lunatic, which of course is never a good sign.
And I am baby boomers, and that's why I wanted people to hear you talk about the things that you've talked about, because you make a compelling argument for the things that we've talked about, and I've endeavored to give you every opportunity to clear up any misperceptions. And I think you've done an amazing job of doing just that. I don't tell people get out and vote. I'm not the guy that does that. I say, do not get out and vote. Get out and make an informed vote. Don't just get out and vote a ticket. Know who you're voting for. Find out what they stand for, what they really think, feel, believe, and are committed to, and then make your vote. And that's why I love this long-form thing, so people can find out. I didn't just read a headline about Robert Kennedy Jr. I listened to, and they will listen to this top, side, and bottom, and usually more than once. Is there anything we haven't talked about that we should?
Well, I have the highest favorability rating of any of the people that they've polled. So given a choice, people would rather vote for me, and they would rather vote for a candidate that inspires them and that gives them hope for our country and for their future, for rebuilding the middle class, for ending this debt crisis, et cetera, and winding down the wars. But many of them say that they're going to vote for President Biden because otherwise Trump will get elected. So it's out of fear. And the same is true to some extent of President Trump. People say, we got to keep Biden from getting reelected. So they're relying on fear to get the other one elected, and the division, and that amplifies that division, because they can't solve that division that is really critical that we need to solve right now, because they feed on it and they profit from it and they rely on it. They rely on you hating the other guy. I just say, let's talk about the issues that we all agree on, because that's how to make America better. And if I can get people to vote out of hope, then I'll win the election. If they continue to vote out of fear between now and November, then I'm going to lose. One of the big, I think, defamations about me is that I'm anti-vaccine, which is what people have said about me for 20 years. And I've always said, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm fully vaccinated myself, not with COVID. All my childhood vaccines, my kids were all fully vaccinated. And my issue is, like every medicine, vaccines cause injuries. And we know this because the vaccine courts have paid out billions of dollars. The other thing they say is that we shouldn't talk about them because, it will harm public faith in the program. And that is where I differ. I think no matter how rare they are, that we need to take care of people who are injured. And that's the group I, am concerned about. And there are a lot of people who say, when I try to talk about this, I get gaslit, I get marginalized, I get vilified, I get my job taken away. And I think that's wrong. This is a product. It's the only product that you can't sue. So, vaccines, as you know, the Vaccine Act passed in 1986. You can't sue them if you're injured. So there's silence about injuries. What I say is, if they know they can be sued, they behave better. The four companies that make all 72 of the vaccines that are now mandated for our children, those four companies have paid something like $79 billion in criminal penalties over the past 20 years for other products they make for which they can be sued. We should be particularly careful about protecting people who are injured. And that's all I'm saying. I'm never going to take anybody's vaccine. If vaccines are working for you, and God bless you, I believe in choice, in liberty. The government shouldn't be ordering people to take a product, particularly one that is protected from liability.
And
But-
they're getting paid for.
Right. But ultimately, my default position is always going to be freedom and, freedom of choice. And we ought to be able to have the right to make informed choices. The government has shown that it's too corrupt, and its relationship with the pharmaceutical industry is too corrupt to trust them on these issues. We need oversight, and we need, safeguards. And that's my position on vaccines. It's not that we should get rid of them, and it's not that they're bad. It's just that let's take care of the people who get injured.
So you want more transparency.
Yeah.
And if people want to take them, you recognize they do some good.
Yeah.
And people should have a choice.
Yeah.
But an informed choice. And I agree with you. There's not enough transparency about it. That's what you're after.
Exactly.
That's what I mean. There's a perception problem. I think a lot of my audience hasn't heard you talk about that before today. So I think that's been a very revealing interview. I hope you think so.
I really enjoyed it, and thank you for giving me this platform.
Yeah, I think people are going to learn a lot, and I can tell you, I've been talking to my audience leading up to this, and I said, I want to know what really matters to you, what's important to you, and it comes down to the same two things: safety. They want to be safe. And they don't feel safe right now. They don't feel mentally and emotionally safe. They don't feel physically safe. And when I drill down on that a little bit, that involves the border, and it involves criminality on the streets, and that involves border. And a lot of them have problems with the fact that we're no longer seem to be a nation of law. People get arrested and turn right back out. So they don't feel safe. And the other is financial security. And if you look at all the way back to the 1940s when Maslow talked about the hierarchy of needs, it goes back to that. First was physiology, people wanting to survive. They want to be safe where they're not threatened and know that they can provide for themselves and their family. And everything after that, watch that third step, it's a doozy. That's what they're telling me. It's security, safety, and they just tell me, these politicians, they just don't read the room. They're asking us to meet them where they are. They don't seem to want to meet us where we are.
Yeah, well, that's my focus. And how do we rebuild the American middle class? More than half the people in this country are making $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs, and they're putting that money on their credit cards. A couple months ago, we hit a milestone at $1 trillion of credit card debt. A guy at the gym yesterday told me that he just got a credit card bill charging 34% interest. If the mafia did that, they would be in jail for loan sharking. All of those companies are owned by BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And, so it's just these mechanisms for shifting wealth upward, and they are strip mining. They are vacuum cleaning the wealth and the equity from the American middle class. They've declared war on the middle class in this country. We cannot support this country with an oligarchy of billionaires. President Trump and President Biden, during 500-day lockdown, created 500 new billionaires, and they shifted $4.3 trillion north from the American middle class to this new oligarchy. You can't sustain democracy if you've just got a very, very wealthy above and widespread poverty below, and that's where we are in this country today.
They need to hear you talk about that, because I'm telling you, they think he's a Kennedy. Kennedy's a wealthy family. It's American royalty. He doesn't connect with us, doesn't know where we are.
I mean, I've been sitting, at kitchen tables like that for my whole career, because the career that I chose is representing people, mainly fishermen. My father, many years ago, he would bring us to Southeast Washington, to Appalachia, and he would bring us to the Indian reservations and to the Rust Belt. And he would say to us, and, we would go into people's houses and talk about how they lived. And he would say, these are our people. These are Kennedy people, because the big shots, they don't need the Kennedys. It's the people who, are struggling to make this country a great nation and are struggling with their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
And they don't have a voice in Washington. And that's, what you're supposed to do with your life.